Welcome back to my round 7 recap from Kragerø. I didn't have time to record the recap after this game finished because it was such a long game. And the funny thing about this game, I thought I was going to be winning within the first like 15 or 20 moves. So I was playing a player by the name of Isaac Vin Bratjörg. Apologies if I'm butchering the pronunciation. I think he's from Norway, and is a pretty young player, maybe 13 or 14 years old. I've been playing a lot of players younger than me this tournament, so this opponent is no different. And I wasn't able to find too many of my opponent's games online beforehand, but I saw a few games where he was playing Dutch against d4 and c4. And in this game, I decided to play a move on move one that I almost never play, that being knight to f3. And the reason why I played this move is because I was expecting the Dutch, is what he played, and I had a very tricky line prepared, pawn to d3. So this avoids like the main lines where white already has d4, c4 played. And the idea of d3 is actually to go for a very quick e4. And there's some really interesting gambit lines that can occur from this. Now, we didn't go into a gambit specifically, but just to show if black plays one of the most natural moves, knight f6, I would play e4 and basically sack the pawn in the center, and then play bishop d3. And I was preparing this before the game, and there's a lot of cool variations that can arise here. For example, if knight f6, then knight to g5 is playable. And there's already threats of taking on h7, followed by bishop g6 checkmate. So I was excited to go into some of these lines, but instead of playing knight f6, he very quickly played d6. And he was actually playing the opening very quickly, which surprised me a little bit because this is a pretty rare variation, and there is no way he prepared this before the game, because I don't think I've ever played this like even online. So I play e4, this is still prep, pawn to e5, and knight to c3. Now, one more tidbit about this opening that I'm just remembering. I first discovered this line back in, I want to say 2013 or 2014, and I was actually preparing this against none other than Levi Rosman at the Chicago Open. I think that was the last time I played knight f3 on move one in a tournament game, or at least one of the last times. Now, Levy in that game played g6, and we went a different route. But I finally managed to get this line in a tournament after about 10 years. So we got to this position, knight c3, and knight to f6 was played. And this resembles some sort of like reverse King's Gambit declined, maybe some kind of Philidor type setup for black. Now, I knew he plays Caro-Kann against e4, so I was trying to just get a structure that he'd be less familiar with. And I was still in prep here. I took the pawn, takes, and then I play pawn to d4. And it looks a little bit weird because I've played d3 and d4 within the first few moves of the game. But d4 is very much justified here because I have the two knights developed and I'm hitting the pawn on e5. And there's a line here that he didn't go into, but if he plays e4, then white can get away with knight h4, and it's a bit awkward for black to find a square for the bishop, because if bishop e6, I have d5, bishop f7, and knight f5. And this was my pre-game prep. There's a cool idea of g6, there's knight h6, and I'd get the bishop pair. But we went a different route. He played knight to c6, and I also looked at this position before the game. I played bishop to b5. He took, I took, and yeah, before the game, maybe about like 20 minutes before, I had this position on my computer, and I was prepared for bishop to d7. And then what was I planning to play? Oh yeah, I was gonna castle. I just want to show like my the extent of my preparation. I was looking at takes, 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 takes. And then if bishop e7, there's this cool idea, queen c4, getting initiative against the c7 pawn, also preventing black from castling. And then if this, then there's this move, and there's knight e6 ideas. And I believe the engine will give a small plus for white here. So it's been a common theme in this tournament that I try and prepare as deeply as possible in a lot of obscure lines for my opponents. And sometimes it works out, In this game, I'd say it did work out because instead of playing bishop d7, which should be played, my opponent played a very questionable move, queen to e7 check. And the issue with this move is it just hampers the development of the dark squared bishop, and it aligns the king and the queen on the open file. So eventually I'd really want to get a rook to e1. And it doesn't really address the threat of the bishop hanging and the knight being attacked as well. So after queen e7, I was pretty pleased to see this move. And I actually took a moment here, and I ended up playing the most natural move, bishop to e3. But for a brief moment, I really was curious about this move, king to d2, essentially bond clouding, but threatening rook to e1, and there's the additional threats of this and this. And I couldn't get myself to even take this move seriously. Just during the game, I assumed that king d2 is ridiculous, but I do want to check with engine if this is playable, because I was dreaming of like playing king d2 and then making like a over-the-top YouTube thumbnail with a title bond cloud in all caps. But let's see, king d2, is this playable for white? Wow. Wow. White's not worse here. Black has to equalize with knight e4. That's cool that like white's position is so good that bond clouding is possible and it's not losing. But yeah, let's go back to what happened in the game. I played bishop e3, and yeah, like a sane person, I just want to castle and get the rook to e1. He plays bishop to d7, I castle, and then he plays knight to e5. And I wasn't actually anticipating this move, but it's very logical because, for one, he's blocking or trying to block the file, also trying to initiate some trade, and maybe preparing pawn c6. And then in this position, I calculated a funny line that we ended up getting in the game. I started with bishop to g5, and after c6, there's a really nice idea for white not to move the bishop, but to play pawn f4. And once I played this move, I was feeling very, very good about the position. There's a lot of issues for black, given the knight's hanging, the king and queen are aligned, rook e1 is bound to happen. And if my bishop is taken, then all of a sudden there's knight d5 possibilities, hitting so many targets in black's position. At this point, I thought the game might just be over within a few more moves, but boy, was I wrong. And from here, my opponent actually was very resourceful and managed to keep fighting, starting with castling queenside. And it's a clever move because after takes, I'm temporarily up a minor piece, but my knight and bishop are hanging. I saw this coming, and I had a move in store, knight to b3, with idea that after he takes, I play knight to d5, and this is a position that we got. And it looks like white's winning here pretty cleanly because I'm hitting the queen, the knight, and I'm ready to take, and then just win, eventually win the exchange and be up a decisive amount of material. But then he plays queen e6, and after takes, he plays bishop e7 here. And I began to realize that the position is actually not that simple. After I win material, my pieces aren't too impressive, especially the knight on b3 and rook on a1. And his bishops can very quickly come to life. If the bishop comes to c6 and rook comes to g8, there can be a lot of pressure against my king side. And of course, this bishop is dreaming to come to this g1, a7 diagonal. As fortunate, the knight stops bishop c5 here. But yeah, once we got this position, I realized the game's not going to be ending anytime soon, and it still requires a lot of work. So I start with queen h5, which I thought is a nice move, preparing rook e1, and I really want to pressure this isolated e-pawn. He plays rook g8, and I play rook to f2. I wanted to play rook e1, but I wasn't sure about rook g5. And then if I take the pawn, there's all of a sudden like rook takes g2. This line scared me a little bit because king takes g2, queen g4. If I go in the corner, then bishop c6 happens. It just looked really scary. And I figured rook f2 is just a safe move. Make sure there's no funny business on g2. So he plays a5 here. And yeah, a5, I think it was played with good intention. He's trying to remove my knight so the bishop can come in. But I think this was a little bit too slow because I have rook e1, and not only am I attacking the pawn, but I'm also pinning the pawn. So I'm setting up ideas of knight d4. And yeah, black isn't in time to play pawn a4. He starts with rook g5, I win h7, and then he plays bishop to c6. And yeah, around here, I thought, like initially, I thought I was going to be winning very easily with this move, knight d4, which looks like it just yeah, forks the queen and bishop. Now, I didn't end up playing this move, but let me show this on the board, because this is a nice looking move, combining the pin and the fork, so basically a pork. But black has a really, really cool response, which is basically the reason why I didn't play knight d4. Black has a move bishop c5 here, essentially meeting the pork with the shish kebab on this diagonal. And if I take the queen, then rook takes g2, and this is also a pork because the rook is pinned and king and rook are forked. And I think, is white losing here? I mean, it's at least perpetual check, but I did not want to go into this position. So for that reason, I didn't play knight d4. I took a long think, and I started with queen h8 check, with the idea that if the king moves to c7, then I can play knight d4, and if bishop c5, then I take the queen with check, and it's a triple fork. So a lot of tactical possibilities here, but he didn't play king to c7, he played king d7. So I still don't have knight d4 because of the same reason, I think. I haven't checked this with engine, so maybe I missed something, but I still didn't want to play knight d4. And I decided on the move pawn to h4. And when I played pawn h4, I realized he had a really cool response, which I did see before I played h4, but it does look scary. He responded with the move queen h3, which is just a really cool resource, pinning the pawn from behind, threatening g2 now 3 times. And yeah, I can't take the rook, and it looks scary for white, but there was a move to stay alive here. It was rook d1 check, and after he played king c7, I was able to simplify with queen takes e5, rook takes e5, and pawn takes h3. So very fancy way of trading down. And when I saw this position from a distance, I thought it should be a pretty routine win because I'm up the exchange and a pawn after bishop takes h4. However, it's very far from simple because the bishops are just so strong, especially in a wide open position. My knight is still a little bit awkward on b3, and black has initiative. So we keep going. I play rook to f4. He attacks the rook. I check. He plays king b6, and I play knight d4. So finally getting the knight to a better central square. And it's my dream to trade the knight for one of black's bishops, but he avoids the trade, attacks the rook, and rather than moving the rook, I go for a counterattack knight to f3. And now it looks really messy because so many things are attacked in various directions. But I'm not really forcing the trades here because he has bishop e3, and after I move my king, he just moves his rook. And now everything's defended in black's position, and my rook is still attacked. So I gave a check, he moved back, and then I played pawn to b3, just kind of solidifying the queen side, ensuring there's no bishop c4 check, or bishop takes a2. And the game keeps going from here. He plays bishop c6, I play rook e1. When I played rook e1, I had a sneaky idea. I was hoping he would try and set up a trap, but then there's actually a counter trap. Now, he didn't walk into the line I was hoping for, but I was hoping for bishop c5 with the idea that I would play rook e5, and it looks like this is a blunder because bishop takes f3, defending the rook, and both bishops are not capturable because this bishop's defended through X-ray vision. But I do have a way to win material here, is to take the rook, take, and then fork the bishops. Unfortunately, we didn't go into this. I think he probably saw that line, and for that reason, he played bishop to b6. So I can't really force the trades with rook e5 anymore. Rook e5 would actually now be a blunder due to bishop takes f3. And from here, I actually took a pretty long think. I had 25 minutes left, and he has just below 14 minutes. And I was really trying to figure out the right technique The move I wanted to play initially is knight e5, and I probably should have played this move. The idea being that the bishop doesn't have too many squares, but I I was trying to calculate bishop d5, c4, takes, and I'm almost trapping the bishop in the center of the board, but he has a move, bishop g8, and I just didn't want to trade too many pawns off the board. And okay, h3 is still attacked, like bishop d4 is coming, and this line looked a little bit murky. So instead of going for knight e5, I went for a move here which I thought gave me the best chances to win, is rook takes c6. Just sacrificing back the exchange. We can see I thought for about 8 minutes before taking the bishop. Now, I am aware that the engine really didn't like this move, but I think from a practical standpoint, it just made life a bit easier because now my plan is to just gradually walk up with my h-pawn. So here he takes, I play king g2, he goes back, and now the pawn pushing begins. And at this point, I was feeling good. I thought it was going to be a simple win, but the common theme in this game, when I think it's going to be simple, turns out not to be so simple. Because very quickly, after bishop d8, rook e5, rook to d7, black is already trying to get some counterplay. And now I have to juggle the plan of pushing the pawn on the king side while also making sure my queen side doesn't crumble. So I play king f3 here with the idea that after rook d2, I play rook e2. So I'm covering the c-pawn. But then he plays rook d1, and now black has a plan of rook to a1. And it's still a little bit awkward. Like pushing the pawn is a bit slow because the pawn is currently tied down to defending the knight, and the bishop is actually really annoying on d8. So I end up playing rook to g2, defending the knight, trying to make way for the pawn, also making sure that my king can safely go to g4 and not have to worry about checks. But then he plays rook a1, and I think I took another long think here before playing pawn c4. Yeah, it took about 4 minutes. The move I really wanted to play was pawn h5, but I wasn't sure about this line because after rook takes a2, h6, bishop f6, and the bishop will always be controlling the promotion square, and black is very quick to play pawn a4 and make a passed pawn of his own. And in these situations where there's passed pawns on opposite flanks, the bishop really shows its superiority over the knight. And I was aware of this, so I didn't want to get a situation where it's a pawn race and he has a bishop versus knight. So instead of carelessly pushing the pawn, I play pawn to c4, defending a2 and ensuring he's not getting a passed pawn. The drawback of this move is it simplifies a little bit on the queen side after takes, and then he plays pawn to a4, and it's still kind of up in the air. Now I'm thinking he maybe should have played rook c1 here, gone after the pawn, but again, I haven't had a chance to check with the engine. a4 had some logic to it. There's ideas of a3 and then eventually rook b1 to b2, but this did give me time to start making more progress on the king side. King g4 was played, rook c1, and then pawn h5. So at this point, I'm completely okay with giving away the c4 pawn because it's all about trying to queen the h-pawn. He takes, I play king to f5, rook h4, and king g6. At this point, I was feeling a little bit more comfortable that my king is optimized, pawn is very close to queening, and not only that, but I'm controlling f6 square, so bishop f6 is generally just not possible, and it's going to take the bishop some time to get to this long diagonal. So he tried pawn c4 here, but I play pawn h7, and after bishop b6, rook c2, the pawn's defended, and I realize I can just go after the c-pawn because this rook is overworked. I just want to take on c4 next move. So he plays c3. I don't think there is much better because of bishop d4. I would take and then pin. So yeah, c3, I take, and then he plays king to a6. And at this point, I kind of just stopped thinking, and I thought like everything is winning. So I played the first move that came to mind, rook h3, but I actually didn't realize how much fight black has left in this position. I thought, okay, I'd just trade rooks and then queen the pawn. It should be easy. But after takes, he's in time to play bishop d4. And it takes some time to actually queen the pawn, because in order to queen, my knight has to come to g7. And in that time, he's going to try and get counterplay on the queen side. Thankfully, I'm winning the race, essentially, after knight f4, king b5, knight e6. I hit the bishop, so gain a nice tempo, and I play king to f7, chasing the bishop away from the corner, and then knight to g7. But he still didn't give up. He king a3, I queen, and then king takes a2, and now a3 is guaranteed for black, and I still have to figure out how to not allow the pawn to queen. But thankfully at this point it was relatively simple. Played queen h2, a3, and queen to c2. And now black is a bit stuck in the corner. He plays king a1, and now my knight comes back. And there's really not much to do here. He moved back to a2, knight comes back even more. And finally, yeah, actually in this position, I still had to be careful. If I touch my king, the game would end in a draw. Every king move is stalemate. This would be a really sad stalemate for white, but really funny stalemate for black. But I didn't move my king. I played knight d2 and then delivered mate on b1. So it was a long fight. Big kudos to my opponent for not giving up after an opening gone wrong. And yeah, pretty nice finish. 68 moves in total. I think this is my only game this tournament that has ended with checkmate on the board. So it's nice to get at least one checkmate in these games. So thanks so much for watching. Again, I really appreciate all the nice comments and feedback so far throughout the videos. And yeah, if you have questions, leave them below. If you like these recaps, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.